Here's what's coming up on The World Today. U.S. marks one-year anniversary of Capitol riot. President Biden accuses former President Trump of spreading a web of lies about the 2020 election. Kazakhstan government restores fuel price cap after dozens of protesters and police killed. Plus, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says Novak Djokovic was denied entry to the country because he must follow the country's rules. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. People across the United States are commemorating the one-year anniversary of the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol, described by top officials in Washington, D.C. as an unprecedented assault on the country's democracy. Marking the day in an address to the nation, President Joe Biden blamed his predecessor, Donald Trump, for the riot at Congress. He says Trump created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election and the lead-up to the attack.
For the first time in our history, a president had not just lost an election, he tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the Capitol. But they failed. They failed. And on this day of remembrance, we must make sure that such attack never happens again. What did we not see? We didn't see a former president who had just rallied the mob to attack, sitting in the private dining room off the Oval Office in the White House, watching it all on television and doing nothing for hours as police were assaulted, lives at risk, the nation's capital under siege. This wasn't a group of tourists. This was an armed insurrection. They weren't looking to uphold the will of the people. They were looking to deny the will of the people. They weren't looking to uphold a free and fair election. They were looking to overturn one. They were looking to save the cause of America. They were looking to subvert the Constitution. We must be absolutely clear about what is true and what is a lie. And here's the truth. The former President of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest, than America's interest, and because his bruised ego matters more to him than our democracy or our Constitution. He can't accept he lost. The former president and his supporters have decided the only way for them to win is to suppress your vote and subvert our elections. It's wrong. It's undemocratic. And frankly, it's un-American.
And from his resort home in Florida, the former President Donald Trump was watching President Biden's speech. Shortly after the speech, Donald Trump released an angry statement accusing Biden of destroying America. He accuses the current president of using his name to try to further divide America, slamming the speech as political theater and a distraction from the fact that Biden has completely and totally failed. Former President Trump laid out a series of grievances with his successor's policies. He also delved into false claims about the 2020 election. Well, several events are planned in the U.S. to commemorate the events that occurred at the U.S. Capitol on this day last year. 5 people died in the violence, and former President Donald Trump was later impeached for incitement of insurrection, and more than 725 people have since been charged in relation to the attempt to undermine a democratic transition of power. Well, let's take a look at how events unfolded on that day.
We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country.
What followed that speech by former U.S. President Donald Trump on the 6th of January 2021 stunned Americans and the world, once accustomed to seeing the United States as a model of stable democracy.
I believe Donald Trump, I believe this election was stolen by Joe Biden and his Democratic friends.
Rioters clad in assault gear chant, "Hang Mike Pence," while the Vice President and Congress members were in session to certify the 2020 election result and victory of Joe Biden. Democratic and Republican lawmakers had to stop their vote, hide under their seats as the Capitol building was urgently evacuated in a state of panic. 5 people died during the riot and its immediate aftermath. Mr. Trump was impeached by the U.S. House of Representatives for inciting the riot. But last month, the former president remained defiant, rejecting any criticism of his role in an attack that he said was a completely unarmed protest of the rigged election. While he appears to have escaped legal repercussions for the Capitol riot so far, many of the supporters have not. Hundreds have been charged with federal crimes. Meanwhile, since July 2021, the events of January 6 have been under investigation by a partisan House Select Committee in charge of investigating what many have described as one of the darkest days of America's democracy. Investigations have shown a concerted effort by Trump and his allies to prevent Pence from leading Congress in certifying Biden as a lawfully elected president. Although he has shown no evidence that the election was fraudulent, polls show that around 2/3 of Republican voters believe him.
One year on from the day of the deadly destruction when rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol, residents in Washington, D.C. remain concerned about the divisions which have ruptured American society. Many people believe the divisive years of the Trump administration have left a damaging scar on society and may take a long time to heal, while others believe that attitudes towards many social issues, such as the ongoing pandemic, have not changed after the riots.
Insurrection, and even now we have
I think there's definitely some political divide happening in our country right now. That's going to take some time to get over what happened. Obviously, with the year anniversary coming up, it's a good remembrance for what happened, and hopefully it's an opportunity for us to heal as a country and remember what happened that day and the lives that were lost, and hopefully we can use that as something to come together.
I feel like there are still a lot of people who have not changed their minds in the last years about a lot of things, be that racial justice or COVID or any of the other issues, the election.
Probably have always just been divided, but no one really just talked about it as much, and now people feel like they have a platform, so it seems like we're more divided, but it's probably always just been like this.
Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, let's begin with the president's speech. This was some of the most pointed remarks of his presidency so far. President Joe Biden pointedly accused his predecessor, Donald Trump, and his supporters in the Republican Party of holding a dagger at the throat of American democracy. Speak to us about his speech and what else was said in the 30-minute address.
You're exactly correct. This was probably one very clear, poignant, as you stated, remarks by the President of the United States. And we know that Vice President Kamala Harris spoke prior to the President, giving some remarks as well. And as we all know, that at that time she was within the Capitol. I mean, she was serving as a congressional member, and so her staff and all of those. So her heart definitely bleeds and it feels for that day and remembering that day. But we also know that the president's remarks are one that is really trying to speak to, I think, the population of America that is very hurt by this. This is also a stand for law enforcement. He took a stand for those Capitol Police officers. He took a stand for all of those individuals who were on the front line that day. And I think that was where he's hoping to unite America, is to say that democracy is not going to go down in a way in which we are going to tear down our Capitol. And I think that was his intentions today. His intention were to show support for police. And I think that he definitely was able to make some clear statements. And we know that obviously it did bring some negative statements and some other statements from the former president. But I think that was definitely going to happen, and many people expected that.
Okay, so former President Donald Trump has responded, and maybe it's not so surprising that he's still repeating claims of election fraud. He's been repeating them for some time now. We know the House committee investigations are ongoing, but how likely is it for the former president to be held accountable for any part of this?
Well, there was new evidence brought forth late last week and Sunday of this week that I believe will potentially allow those investigating this to potentially subpoena White House officials. Now, whether or not they'll be able to directly subpoena former Vice President and also the former president, that I think is still up for question. But I think some of the new information that has been received about his daughter, who was a White House advisor at the time, basically saying, put a stop to this, kind of pleading to have the president do more than just sit in the Oval Office during this rioting of the Capitol. I think that is going to definitely be used as a way to potentially subpoena those who were working in the Oval Office at that time.
Okay, while Donald Trump seems to have escaped any legal repercussions so far, we know that hundreds of his supporters have been charged with federal crimes. What's the update on that?
There are still individuals being subpoenaed every day and individuals being brought with charges every day. And I think that we are now, as you mentioned, there are hundreds that have been brought forth. There's several others that they're looking at, potentially bringing charges against. And I think we will really not see an end to that until the full investigation is over. We will continue to see charges being brought forth against individuals who are involved in the attacks. And as we approach the first one-year anniversary, and it just spurs forth some of the emotion and the pain that was felt that day, it is definitely, we can rest assured that there will be others that will be brought forth over the next coming months and weeks.
Okay, as Americans reflect on the events of that day, what impact has this riot had on the American society?
This has had a great impact, not only on the actual physical structure of the Capitol. The Capitol was once a place where Americans could freely go in and kind of see legislation in practice, in action. They felt very comfortable being able to go to this very pillar of democracy, not only for the U.S. but for the world. But as we know, there were all types of fences put up. There's additional security that's now brought forth that doesn't really allow this place to be kind of a house that the people can come to very easily without much hesitation, and also brings hesitation for those who work there, concern as to whether or not this could happen again. And so I think that people are constantly looking over their shoulders as whether they're visiting, working in Congress, but it has brought a sense of fortitude for those who are congressional members. It's brought them another, I think, sense of reason for why they are there. I think that they are really believing in the democracy of America and really working toward preserving that democracy.
All right, Maria, thanks a lot for bringing us up to speed.
Thank you.
And still to come on the program, we'll have more stories plus. Well, that's one way to do it. People in the Netherlands smash cars and scream at the sea to vent COVID-19 frustration. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Kazakhstan's government is restoring vehicle fuel price caps for 6 months after days of deadly unrest. Petrol and diesel prices will also be capped for the same period. It comes after protesters took to the streets across the country, resulting in the death of dozens of demonstrators and police officers.
A security alliance of ex-Soviet states led by Russia is set to send peacekeeping forces into Kazakhstan after Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev appealed for help to stabilize the unrest in the country. Anti-government protests have entered the third straight day. Demonstrations were first triggered by widespread anger over a rise in fuel prices, but have expanded into wider opposition to Tokayev's predecessor, Nursultan Nazarbayev. The Kazakh government resigned on Wednesday as police clashed with protesters who torched state buildings and seized the airport in the country's largest city, Almaty. In a televised speech, President Tokayev denounced the protesters and claimed they were foreign-trained terrorists. Nazarbayev, the main target of protesters' anger, ruled with an iron fist for 3 decades. Though he stepped down in 2019, he retained significant power and is believed his family still controls much of the country's oil-driven economy. But younger generations have begun demanding liberalization, as seen in other former Soviet states. States of emergency have been declared across several provinces, and the internet remains shut down. Police say at least 13 members of the security forces have been killed and 353 injured in the unrest.
The World Health Organization's Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says the more infectious Omicron variant of COVID-19 appears to produce less severe disease than the globally dominant Delta strain, but it should not be classed as mild. Governments across the world are tightening restrictions as the Omicron variant continues to drive up COVID-19 cases globally. In the UK, the number of people in hospital with coronavirus is at its highest since February last year, amid increasing pressure on health services. Here's more on the Global Update. Latest government figures show a total of 17,276 people were in hospital in the UK with COVID-19 as of January the 4th, the highest number since February 19th, 2021.
Mr. Speaker, and I think that
Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the country is seeing its fastest growth in cases as more than 20 hospital trusts declared a critical incident. And over in Israel, data supports growing evidence worldwide that Omicron causes milder illness than previous variants of the coronavirus, even as the country grapples with a record number of daily infections. Nonetheless, health officials are concerned that even if Omicron is less harmful, its fast surge could overload healthcare systems.
What we're seeing in Israel is very rapid spreading of the virus, mostly the Omicron variant. And as a consequence, at Hadassah, we're now seeing a rapid increase in hospitalization. Now, it seems that the virus is not as violent or virulent as the previous versions, but considering the rapid spreading, we see an increasing rate of hospitalizations. We already opened one ward, it is full, and today at Hadassah we're opening the second ward.
The director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says he fears that COVID-19 could become endemic on the continent, given the slow pace of vaccination.
Unless and until by the end of this year, the continent actually scale up its vaccination to above 70 or 80%, my worry is that we might actually be at the end of this year into a situation, a scenario where COVID becomes endemic.
Dr. John Nkengasong also says that severe lockdowns are no longer the best way to contain COVID-19, praising South Africa for adopting that approach recently.
We are very encouraged with what we saw in South Africa during this period, where they look at the data in terms of severity, and they actually did what we are encouraging countries to do, to really say that the period where we were using lockdown as a tool, severe lockdown as a tool, is over. We should actually be looking at how we use public health and social measures more carefully and in a balanced way as the vaccination increases.
At least 125 passengers on an international flight from Italy have tested positive for COVID-19 on arrival in India. All passengers have been asked to undergo institutional isolation. Meanwhile, India reported 90,928 new daily COVID-19 cases over the past 24 hours, up nearly fourfold since the start of the year. And finally, France's parliament has approved President Emmanuel Macron's plans for a vaccine pass to help curb the spread of the Omicron variant. People in France have for several months had to show either proof of vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test to enter venues such as cinemas and cafes and use trains. But with Delta and Omicron variant infection surging, the government decided to drop the test option in the new bill. The vaccine pass rules will apply to over 16s and not over 12, as the government had initially sought. Now, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says no one is above rules after the country's border force cancelled the visa of Novak Djokovic and denied him entry into the country to play in the Australian Open tennis tournament. Djokovic, the world #1 tennis player, was initially granted a medical exemption from the country's COVID-19 vaccination requirements to play in the Australian Open, but he was left stranded at Melbourne Airport overnight over visa issues.
By the Commonwealth Government. Rules are rules, and there are no special cases. Rules are rules. It's what I said to you yesterday. That's the policy of the government, and has been our government's strong border protection policies, and particularly in relation to the pandemic, that has ensured that Australia has one of the lowest death rates from COVID anywhere in the world. And I want to thank the Australian Border Force officers for doing their job, implementing the government's policy. And the ABF has done their job. Entry with a visa requires double vaccination or a medical exemption. I'm advised that such an exemption was not in place, and as a result, he is subject to the same rule as anyone else.
Well, here's one way to let out your frustrations. One swinging a sledgehammer and the other a crowbar. Twin brothers Stephen and Brian Kridger grin as they take turns destroying a car. Well, they're participants in Mindful Smashing, which is a spin-off project from event organisers Car Smash, aimed at providing lockdown locals with ways of releasing anger and frustration built up during a pandemic now entering its third year. Dutch bars, restaurants and most stores have been closed since mid-December, when restrictions took effect that the government, battling to contain record numbers of coronavirus cases, is not due to review until January 14.
There's nothing to do these days because everything's closed. We can't work because we own a bar and we're closed. So we thought we'd let some of that frustration go and smash up a car.
We let the clients write down on the car with spray cans, you know, what's present. And then they smash it out of their lives. But we do that by slowing down. You know, we really try. The minute they start whacking the car, we ask them to close their eyes, really feel put their feet on the floor, feel the power, and really from every vein in your body, feel what you're doing. And from that way, trying to get rid of it out of your life. And yeah, it's all about really focusing, a lot of feeling rather than thinking. In this society we think a lot, but we try to focus more on the feeling part.
Definitely don't try that at home. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Shabuele. Bye for now.